Thousands of years have passed, and people still do not learn their lesson. New labels, new techniques, new approaches, but the same result. During Pharaoh's time, they were called magicians, wise men, sorcerers, which we now know that the terminology used to describe these sorcerers, these witches, fits more appropriately with an alchemist. Someone who could manipulate chemicals. And even the term alchemy took a mystical value when people thought that they were somehow using magic to turn common metals into gold. So now all of a sudden, alchemists were also some sort of magicians. But it was just someone with scientific knowledge beyond their time. When my high school digital electronics teacher told us about fiber optics and how the speed of digital information in the future would allow for ads to appear in the field through the TV that weren't actually there in the field, we thought, wow, that's amazing. That's the futuristic thing of the future. We're never going to see that. He's imagining things. How can they put something on the TV that's not there in the field? Well, nowadays, whenever you're watching football and you want to know if it was a first down or not, doesn't magically appear a little line over there that grows in the grass instantly while the commentators are talking? Oh, it grew in the grass. No, it's technology. My professor was talking 20-something years ago. It didn't exist then, but he knew in his knowledge of electronics that was coming. So through the centuries, these people were simply scientists, I guess, if you may, of their times. They were seeking knowledge, they were finding knowledge that others didn't have, and they used that knowledge. They used that knowledge of components and chemicals and other factors that your average Joe would know nothing about. And then they would enchant the crowds. They would mesmerize kings. They'd acquire money and influence and even power by properly utilizing their knowledge. See, the knowledge they had wasn't bad. It wasn't the knowledge itself. It would be equivalent of us having computer knowledge. Wait, we're too far ahead. We're still in the computer knowledge. Computer knowledge. Scary guy over there. We may know enough to hack into someone's account and steal their money, completely clean them out. Or we can use that knowledge to become security experts. The knowledge is the same, exact same knowledge. Now the second ugly guy's over here. It may be that we may know 12 different ways to kill a man using only your thumb. Ninjas. With this thumb, I can kill a man 12 different ways. Or we can use that knowledge of human anatomy to save lives. The knowledge is the same. So you see, the sin of these sorcerers, of these magicians, wasn't the knowledge that they had, but what they chose to do with that knowledge, how they utilized that knowledge. And that's where we start our study today. In Exodus 7, verse 11. When God would boldly show His power through Moses and Aaron, so that Pharaoh would let his people go. If you're not familiar with this part of the history of the people of Israel, just turn to Exodus chapter 7. Even start a little before then, and you know what I'm talking about. When God called Moses and said, I'll take care of this. I will show my power. I will do this and that, and they'll see my power. First, we have all these wonders and miracles in an account of incredible things that take place. And the first one, it's when Aaron casts down the rod and it becomes a snake. God told Moses, this is what you're going to do. See Aaron's rod? Tell him to cast it on the ground and it will become a snake. And you show Pharaoh who I am. Who am I? But then we see verse 11. That's where the issue here starts that we're going to be looking at today. Then Pharaoh summoned the wise men and the sorcerers and the magicians of Egypt. And they, the magicians of Egypt, also did the same by their secret arts. Impressive. They did the exact same thing Aaron did with the staff. They turned the staff into a serpent. Oh, then is God not that powerful? Oh, there's a little article at the Apologetics Press site. It talks about exactly that. It's the idea that skilled magician could use a snake in such a way it's no novel concept, especially in the world of magic tricks. Walter Gibson, I'm just quoting, in his book Secrets of Magic, states that there is a certain type of snake that can be made motionless by applying pressure just below its head. Gibson also notes that that particular species of snake suitable for this stunt happens to be the Najahaje, otherwise known as the Egyptian cobra. How fitting. An Egyptian cobra can become a staff if you apply just the right pressure to that snake. And that's just a little portion of an excellent article making the case that Pharaoh's sorcerers didn't need supernatural powers to make it look like they did the same thing Aaron did. And despite the fact that God's serpent swallowed up the magician's serpent, we see Pharaoh's reaction in verse 13. That's very important. It says, still Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen to them. He stopped paying attention. The moment his magicians did their trick and matched Aaron's miracle, he stopped listening. So the question for us to start asking ourselves as we're listening to what I'm sharing with you, if some scientists today can imitate what God has wonderfully and carefully made, will we harden our hearts? Because the story continues. The second instance takes place when God told Moses to turn the river into blood, and so he did. The Nile turned into blood in front of their very eyes. But once again, in verse 22, we have the issue we're dealing with. You've probably seen this movie before. I remember it as a kid. But verse 22 says, the magicians of Egypt did the same by their secret arts. So Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, and he would not listen to them as the Lord had said. Once again, their special knowledge of how things work, either scientific or simple trickery, or some supernatural power given by Satan himself. Whatever means they had, they were able to emulate what God had done through Moses and Aaron. Even today, we have scientists trying to explain all of the plagues, actually, through some natural occurrence. Some say it was because of a volcanic eruption. Another group explains that it's through some certain type of algae that the river was made look like blood, but it didn't really turn into blood. And the high concentration of that algae, it's what killed all the fish. See, whatever means Pharaoh's magicians used, scientific trickery or supernatural power itself, it was enough to look like they had done the same thing God had done. A parenthesis here, a little note that as I was studying, and I read someone pointed it out, it's like, well, if they were so powerful, why didn't they undo what God had done instead of making more bloody water? I thought, that's an interesting point. But once again, the most significant outcome, especially for our study, of their imitation, it's at the end of verse 22. Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, and he would not listen to them. A third time, we find the magicians being successful when God brought upon the plagues of the frogs. The land was covered with frogs. God was demonstrating His power once again. But then in chapter 8, verse 7, the magicians did the same by their secret arts and made frogs come upon the land of Egypt. Impressive. Many authors have been baffled, completely confused, by the fact that the magicians were able to imitate God's miracles in these three instances. Especially in the instance of the the plague of the frogs, they couldn't explain how they imitated. But let's think about it for a moment. If someone told me 30 years ago that we would be able to talk to someone while seeing them in the screen of our little phones. Somebody told me that 30 years ago. Here's what I would say, or at least think. You're watching too many science fiction movies. That is a very cool idea. I don't know, how many movies did you watch? If they were made in the 70s or before, when the spy had a little car and a huge little TV on a car, they could communicate. I don't know, you can quote however many movies you remember of those. I know I was mesmerized and I thought, oh, how incredible, how futuristic. Guess what we do today? If they weren't having church or whatever they're having right now, I could get somebody in Brazil to watch us here in our service and talk to us as we've done before. How about taking care of, giving medical attention to a baby inside the mother's womb? Think of the future, wasn't it? How about transplanting organs? Even more, I've heard about now that they're transplanting even limbs. It's not just organs anymore. You lose a hand, they're figuring out a way to put a new hand on you. There's an interesting one. To chemically alter some formulas, and you put some chemicals together, and it imitates the tastes or the smell in nature. Red number 5. Whatever you read in your food, it's not your food. It's the taste of it. It tastes just like it. But it's whatever chemical they mixed in there. How about the technology to explore other planets? Another science fiction one that will never happen. And just so happened that we put a rover in Mars. Just because some people have knowledge or access to technology not commonly known to everybody, it doesn't mean that they are toe-to-toe with God. It doesn't matter how much man discovers, how much he's capable of doing, if he's capable of bringing frogs out of the Nile, if he's capable of imitating all the plagues of Egypt, somehow through technology or whatever it is that they're able to imitate. It doesn't mean that they are God-like, that they have any power of God. So do not fret over the magician's abilities, over scientists' abilities to imitate these miracles, or any miracle for that matter. Because soon enough, especially in the case of these magicians, they discover who they're messing with. When the plague of the gnats was brought upon Egypt, they couldn't produce any gnats. Now we find in chapter 8, verse 18, that the magicians tried by their secret arts to produce gnats, but they could not. So there were gnats on man and beast. So as this plague started to take over the land, the magicians started to recognize, oh, they were in trouble. Now we can't imitate this one. We're in trouble. Still today, some try to give that natural explanation I was mentioning, of how Moses and Aaron did that. They say, and let me point it out to you, that the dead frogs is what attracted the lice and the flies. That's why you had the nets. It's because the frogs died. Now you have all this. I find it amusing that people even argue that. Smart people argue that. They probably skip logic from their classes. Because Moses would have had to have perfect timing. He would have to know exactly when the eggs would hatch, how long for the larvae to grow, and then genially calculate with Einstein precision when to call forth the plague, so that he could con Pharaohs. Because he knew all that, and he'd go, now you're going to have the plague of the gnats. Now. Oh, wait. That's way behind. One more. Are we too far? Anyway, let's go back to the plague of the gnats. You'll find it. Good luck. But we know that Moses wasn't Einstein. He wasn't a genius. Just keep going. You end up finding it. It disappeared. Did I save the wrong one? I saved the undone one? Oh, I saved the unfinished one. Oh, no. Let's keep going. There's more. Oh, wait. This is the end slide. Go back. Go back. Stay with us here. Let's refocus as they're finding. There you go. Wait. Frogs? After the frogs, before the eye, somewhere in between here they got lost on the cyberspace. See, technology, people. Let's refocus. Because we know that Moses didn't use any genius power to calculate when to call forth that plague. We know that. So it's just silly to me to think that they would argue. It was just natural, and Moses just knew when to call out these things. Even that in itself would have had to be miraculous for him to know exactly when to call out all those things. So, hey. And this time, the magicians even knew they were in over their heads. Because in verse 19, they said, this is the finger of God. Sadly, Pharaoh still wouldn't budge. But Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen to them as the Lord had said. So finally, after trying to keep up with God's power for one miracle and two plagues, they discovered they were outmatched. And then things took a turn for the worse. Because not only they were outmatched, at this next plague, they felt the wrath of God on their flesh themselves. The plague of the boils, which I did not put an image up for, in chapter 9, verse 11, God brought boils upon them, and the magicians felt it themselves. In chapter 9, verse 11, we have the magicians saying the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils. For the boils came upon the magicians and upon all of the Egyptians. Have you noticed the progression? Despite my mishap with the slides. They went from fully matching what God was doing to not matching at all, not being able to imitate, and then to suffering at the hands of the plagues themselves. With every attempt to replicate God's wonders, man has been attempting to either disprove God or to take control and be self-sufficient, be like God. That's what people are trying to do when they try to imitate the miracles of God. When scientists try to imitate creation, they try to disprove God whenever they're making a case for a creator, because if they can imitate whatever scientific mumbo-jumbo they're calling about the plasma and the thing that originated life, well, somebody had to create that for that to happen. But like Pharaoh, every step only serves to harden the hearts of those fighting God tooth and nail. Scientists and magicians can try as much as they want to imitate God's wonders or to explain them away. They may even be successful at times. Maybe a blind person can see through surgery today. That was the picture of the eye. See, now we're there. You're too late. LASIK surgery, and they have the laser surgery to do some surgeries that can help somebody see again. That would be similar to what Christ did, wouldn't it? He made the blind to see. They can even make the lame walk again through the wonders of orthopedic doctors. There you go. People who have lost both limbs or all four of them. Even the dead can be brought back to life if we zap them soon enough with a defibrillator. But we miss the point. We miss the point if we think that our ability to do certain things today takes away from the glory of God. It may be interesting to figure out scientific possibilities for certain questions, but we ought to be careful. Even an atheist had the good sense. He had a very good quote on the subject. Let me just read a quote to you from an atheist, somebody that doesn't believe in God. And he hears people making the case for miracles being explained away by science. This atheist says, to present a naturalistic explanation for accounts in the Bible, I'm changing some words because he wasn't as kind. For accounts in the Bible is both counter to the spirit of the stories and does not make the account more likely to be accurate. The idea of explaining miracles away, as a Christian, it only does a disservice to God's power. It'd be like the magicians of Pharaoh, hardening the hearts of people that should pay attention to what God is doing, to the power of God, to His glory. In other words, if we try to appease those who want a natural explanation for certain miracles, for every miracle, we may actually be fighting against our own call and desire to glorify God. Don't try it. If God called it a miracle, leave it at that. At the most, have fun with the science of it. But don't think you're explaining God's power away. If the knowledge God grants us and people and scientists in general is put to good use, may God be praised. He gave us this knowledge. But if their success leads to the hardened heart, as in Pharaoh's case, I can only pray that those who let their hearts be hardened repent before meeting the same end that the magicians of Pharaoh met, and the whole Egypt met because of the hardness of Pharaoh's heart. Because he went as far, if you don't know the 10 plagues, probably all of you know, but if you don't know, he went as far as the firstborn of every household, of every animal, being killed by the angel of death. So I say, be very careful with these scientific explanations of God's power. Be very careful with where your heart lies as you listen to these things, as you consider the truth behind God's Word, as your opinion of God's Word changes as the magicians present things to you, I should say scientists, alchemists, as people of knowledge beyond their time, present you with things that you wouldn't imagine. That's amazing. I love science fiction myself. And I love the fact that we put a little cart in Mars for nothing. Just to roam around. Pick up some rocks. Love that. So don't take me wrong. I love science. I love magic tricks too. I was even going to do one for you, but I'm not that good. You see it straight through it. So there's nothing wrong with those things. What I'm warning you, it's what happened to Pharaoh in his heart as he allowed those things to harden his heart. Don't allow science today to harden your heart. Allow it to help you see how great God is. Allow it to help you see that His power cannot be matched by nothing we can come up with. Because ultimately, we're all going to face our Creator. And there is no technology, no magic trick, no power in this earth that will get us through those gates without the blood of Christ. So this morning, if you need to be washed in His blood and you know what you need to do, the water is ready. If you don't know what you need to do, but you feel like you need to do something about it, well, we're offering you an opportunity to talk to us. Come forward. Sit in the front pews as together we stand and as we sing.